So we are 24 hours before the 9th of Av. Fast day, a day of mourning, a day of grief, the saddest day of the Jewish calendar. It's funny that we allocate a day to be sad. In the time of COVID, I think we need to allocate a day to be happy. I think we would do much better than that, rather than allocating a day for sadness. A day when we focus about the life that we didn't materialize the way we wanted. And for me, every year it's a very ironic time because my birthday is always the day before Tisha B'Av. And that's a day of reflecting on my past year, reflecting where I'm at. So like 24 hours from when my birthday starts tonight till tomorrow night, it's a very reflective time, very serious time. It's called a personal Rosh Hashanah. It's a personal time to take an accounting of your life. And then I go straight into the saddest day of the year, which every year has been a very interesting feeling, experience going from one to the other. And every year when it comes to Tisha B'Av, I think the same thing. And that is that there is a time for sadness and is a time to allocate for sadness. And I've spoken about it year after year after year after year. But this year I have a different appreciation. Tisha B'Av means something very different in the age of Corona. For me, Tisha B'Av in 2020 means that the reason Jews repeat history over and over and over, and we celebrate the Exodus, which happened 3,500 years ago, and we celebrate the temple, which was destroyed 2,000 years ago, and we just celebrate Rosh Hashanah for what we claim happened, what Torah claims happened 6,000 years ago, creation, Yom Kippur for the forgiveness that we achieved 3,300 years ago, etc., etc., etc. Purim, 2,500 years ago. Hanukkah, 2,300 years ago. Why are we always celebrating stories from so long ago? It's because people need to live with knowledge of the past. When I see the rising anti-Semitism today, when I see the rise in ignorance within our Jewish community today, I realize that maybe, perhaps, one of the reasons that the Torah and then the sages instituted so many chagim, so many days of memory, is because a Jew needs to remember their story, otherwise they're lost. A Jew that doesn't appreciate how far we've come in the last 3,000 years, a Jew that doesn't remember the grieving, the pain that we've been through, will walk in. Think about it like this. Imagine a Jewish child who knows nothing other than the fact that they have a Jewish nose. And they know nothing about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, faith, religion, nothing. And suddenly someone walks over to them and calls them Jew in a derogatory term. What would that kid think? And I'm wondering now, because in the anti-Semitism rising now, I'm wondering if a lot of your children, maybe they haven't experienced it so much locally, but if they're going on social media, they're definitely seeing it. I wonder if they're wondering, what the world? People hate me? For what? What did I do? And my grandfather, I actually read a quote from his book earlier today on the radio, Deep in the Russian Night. He describes how after the Holocaust in Russia, communism, the Iron Wall went up right away. And many Jews who had just been persecuted by the Nazis were now being persecuted by the communists and hated for the fact that they were Jews. And anti-Semitism became rampant, even though communism was all people are equal. And he says, suddenly Jewish kids were asking the question, I don't get it. We became communists, we dropped our Judaism, we did everything right, and the world still hates us. The Nazis kill us despite the fact we're not religious. The Russians hate us despite the fact we don't look like Jews. What is it? You know, recently in the past few years, there's been quite a lot of anti-Semitism towards the religious community, especially in New York and other areas. They're walking the streets, people spit on them, knock them over. And for a while, we're like, okay, it's only the overt Jews, the people who walk around looking Jewish. But if I walk around and I don't look too Jewish, I'm okay. But the anti-Semitism of social media the last few weeks, various celebrities coming and saying they hate Jews, etc., makes me wonder, really? Is it only about the religious Jews they hate? I don't think so. They hate the Jew, which makes you wonder, why? I've never had to face it in my time. I've shared a story of one time being hated or going in Israel and an Arab walked by me and just pushed me. But like it becoming absolutely okay, so much so that thousands of people went off social media yesterday and today just to demonstrate the fact that platforms such as Facebook and Twitter are allowing people to keep anti-Semitic things on. And all the things people are saying, all the anti-Semite things are the same old stuff. We have all the money, we have all the power. And they're not talking about religious Jews, they're talking about Jews. Jews, Rothschilds, Benjamins, whatever pathetic names they have for us. And that's a very unfamiliar feeling for a 21st century Jew, the late 20th century. In other words, I'd imagine most of us, even those who were born before 1950, while the Holocaust was raising its, doing its damage, never necessarily, never felt it so much on a personal level. Yeah, they hate Jews. Maybe a kid in the school hates, etc. But suddenly start seeing it becoming absolutely common, and the same old tropes, the same old nonsense. This, in Belgium they have the yearly fair, and they have Jewish-looking people collecting money and sitting, and just like the same anti-Semitism, the nose, the face, the look. It's like straight out of Der Stürmer in the 1930s. And you ask yourself, why? Now, I don't have a good answer. There are many answers. There's mystical answers, there's spiritual answers, there is logical answers, although the logical answers don't really fit logic, because no matter what the Jew does, they hate them anyway. Some people will say it's just a fact of life. The Talmud says that the reason why the mountain Sinai is called Har Sinai, the Sinai mountain, because the word Sinai also comes from the word sin'ah, hatred. And the moment we received the Torah, the hatred came into this world against us. Many Jews started hating us, and ever since then, it's just within their DNA. And as somebody who, has seen in my history, has so much blood spilled in my history, great uncles, great aunts, great grandparents, even an uncle who died at age 2 in Uzbekistan. I very much grew aware of it, but nevertheless, it was something in the past. It's something that I have to be aware of, but it's just a grounding idea, but ultimately we're heading towards out of it. Now we're facing a world where more and more it's becoming normal. And despite the fact that some of these social media giants are owned by Jews, Facebook is owned by a Jew, Google owned by Jews, et cetera, nevertheless, these platforms are being used as the baseline of tremendous hatred. So I want to ask you a simple question. What is it? Why do they hate us? In other words, what does the anti-Semite know about you that you don't know about yourself? They know something about you. Again, it could be conspiracies, this and that, but somehow they're labeling you as Jewish, as Haredi and Mea Shearim. They're not really seeing the difference. What are they seeing? They're seeing that you and the biggest ultra-religious fanatic anti-Zionist, blah, 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 have so much in common that they categorize you both as the same thing, the Jew, and they hate you both. And maybe in one way, the anti-Semites are right, that we are all the same. In other words, what the anti-Semites tend to remind us is that what unites us is much more than divides us, that no matter how un-Jewish a Jew tries to become, they're as Jewish as Moses. And this is a time although it's not a time we ever dreamed of happening again in our lifetime, and I hope it doesn't get much worse. But it's a time that will cause Jews to ask the question, what the heck? Why? I'm a nice Jew. I'm a nice kid. I mean, yeah, maybe I went to King David. I'm now in varsity. I dated girls, some of them Jewish, some of them not. Most people were cordial to me. Like, I don't like what's going on. I barely fast on Yom Kippur. Like, why in any way does anybody hate me for that? And yet the anti-Semite doesn't see a difference between a Jew who doesn't fast on Yom Kippur. My grandfather describes in his book that a family that converted to Christianity before the war was thrown into the same pit with all their fellow Jews in Krasnostav, Ukraine. Because for the Nazi, you're a Jew. Converted out of the faith, no, sorry, we don't buy it, you're a Jew. You have the race, you have the this, you have the that, you're a Jew. And the Nazis were right, because even if somebody converts out of the faith, they're still Jewish. They maybe have to go to mikveh when they come back just as an act of purity, but they're 100% Jewish. Their kids are Jewish. And a quote that Chief Rabbi Sachs said years ago, he said it at a rabbi's conference, a Chabad rabbi's conference in New York. He says he feels that the Rebbe's vision was after the Nazis chased down every Jew with hate, the Rebbe would chase down every Jew in love. In other words, the antidote to anti-Semitism is absolute love of your fellow Jew. In other words, if the anti-Semite puts us all together in the same bag and wants us all destroyed, the answer is not to separate us. The answer is, yes, you're right, we're all the same, but we're going to be even closer than we've ever been before. Ahavat Yisrael, love of a fellow, is such a paramount fundamental principle, especially now. It's the theme, as we said many times, what broke the Second Temple, what destroyed the Second Temple was baseless hatred. What's going to build the Third Temple is love. The anti-Semite doesn't care if you voted for Bibi Netanyahu or for Benny Gantz or for Meretz, if you're right-wing or you're left-wing. For crying out loud, it doesn't even matter if you're Noam Chomsky and you're an absolute self-hating Jew. It doesn't make a difference. They don't care. They really don't. Do you think the Nazis cared if you're a self-hating Jew or not? The anti-Semite, with all their nonsense and their illogic, they have one thing very correct. We're all the same. They're so wrong in the fact of what they think we're the same in, but they're correct that we're the same. And sometimes we forget that. And sometimes anti-Semites come and remind us we're the same, that we all share the same destiny. And once you were born a Jew, you cannot out-Jew yourself. I don't care what you do. You can't. It's like saying out-human yourself. It's who you are. And then I would tell the person, if they came and sat across me, I would say, so might as well let's get to know who you are. Let's get to know Judaism. Let's get to know what it means to be a Jew. Because you're stuck with that label anyway. You can't out-Jew yourself. You can't outgrow it. You can't throw it away. You can't choose out or sorry, like, I'm out, not for me. You don't get that choice. You really don't. So might as well get to figure out what you are. For so long, we, in each of our lives, many of us crave to find our identity. Who am I? What am I? Where do I belong? And we're actually going to talk about in this year tonight, this idea of how to find your purpose in life. But fundamentally, when you're born a Jew, most of your purpose is put out right in front of you. To be a light unto the nations, to be kind, to make the world a better place, to teach the world compassion and empathy, to do Shabbos and kosher, to teach Jewish values to your children, to stand up for the land of Israel, your homeland, to love fearlessly and fiercely, to show the world what it means morality and ethics, to help the world find God in this world. That's what we're here to do. And when the Jew stops being Jewish, believe me, the anti-Semite doesn't stop hating you. They hate you even more. In 1930s, one of the big arguments the Nazis would say about the German Jews, 95% who are secular, said these guys are the worst because they're trying to make believe as if they're German. They're trying to enter our society from within and destroy it. And anti-Semitism, the worst anti-Semitism that ever rose in history, rose in a secular Jewish community. Germany was not Haredi. Believe me, it wasn't Haredi. They didn't buy it. They felt that the Jews had an agenda. And you have to understand how un-Jewish Germany was. I'm talking about Judaisms. They were very Jewish, but at some stage in the 1800s, the Jews in Germany is where Reform Judaism was invented. At some stage, many of their so-called synagogues took out any mention of Jerusalem and mention of prayer to go to Israel, because Berlin is our Jerusalem and Germany is our Israel. These were the Jews who were so proudly German. I was reading a book someone gave me a few years ago here in the community of their ancestor, of their grandparent or great-grandparent, who was a German Jew. And until the Holocaust, until the 40s even, he could not accept that Germany turned around against him, because he was the ultimate German. He walked around so proud of his World War I outfit. He was so proud of being a German. His family had lived there 300 years. He saw himself more German than Jew. A German Jew, not a Jewish German. And the Nazis didn't buy it. Same story happened in Russia. Originally, the communists came in the early 1900s and said, we're going to bring an ideology in which all of us are equal. All you have to do is drop your faith in God, drop your Jewish practices, and join the communists. So many Jews did. According to some estimates, 80% of the first communist government was Jewish. Within 15 years after that, all of them were killed, including Trotsky, nice Jewish boy, who Stalin saw him as a competition, so he chased him down to Mexico and killed him. And the same Jews who were chasing down their fellow Jews in the 20s and 30s, trying to take Judaism away from them, were killed. By 1950, there was pretty much no religious Jews in Russia, and yet Stalin was vehemently, hugely anti-Semitic. He created a famous doctor's plot in 1953, which I spoke about on the radio today, where he accused his Jewish doctors of trying to poison him. Again, there was nobody religious. They don't hate our religion. That's what you have to understand. Or even if they hate our religion, that's not what they fundamentally hate. There's something they see in a Jew. If the Jew's too powerful, they think the Jew's too powerful. If the Jew's too weak, the Jew's too snobby, the Jew's this. So remember, the Nazis are telling everybody that the Jews are stealing everybody's money. In America, they weren't allowing Jews in the early 20th century because all these Russian Jews are too primitive. Like, you can't win. You're too primitive, you're too sophisticated, you're too this, you're too that. But they see something in us, they just don't know what to articulate. They see that we're here for a reason, and they don't like it. Hitler called us the consciousness of the world. He didn't like us being the conscience of the world. And in his dying wish, he says, continue to fight against the Jew, because you can never build a Third Reich if you have a conscience. So when we reflect on Tisha B'Av, on the crimes we've lived through, when we reflect on the pain we've been through, and it's all true and it's all valid, we cannot forget the other lesson. As we say in the Haggadah and Pesach, they always get up every generation to destroy us. And Hashem saves us. But they get up against us. The non-Jew doesn't buy your nonsense that you're not Jewish. The anti-Semite looks at you in the face and says, I don't care what you do. I don't care what you identify with. I don't care which political movement you claim. I don't care if you become solidarity with us. I don't care. When push comes to shove, I hate your guts because you're a Jew. For me, I know why I'm hated. Because I'm a conscience to the world. Because my history is one of resilience and faith. And people are threatened that Jewish influence, not necessarily in money, but Jewish influence, the ideas of Judaism, threaten their way of life. But at least I have meaning in it. In other words, I don't justify anti-Semitism, but I have meaning in the anti-Semitism. I understand at least somewhat what's going on. What I feel bad is for the Jewish kid who has no idea why he's being hated. He's not sure if he, like, one second, but what am I? I'm just like everybody else. Why do they hate me? In the early 2000s, we blamed it on Israel. All anti-Semitism was anti-Zionism, right? Even 2 years ago, people said there were no real anti-Semites. There were a lot of anti-Zionists. Today, you could say straight out, you hate the Jew. Israel doesn't even come up anymore. Excuses, once you're comfortable to curse at Israel, you're comfortable to curse at the Jew. It's all the same thing. Israel's not even part of the conversation for most of these anti-Semites. It's just, I hate the Jew, straight out. So even the kids, like the wannabes over here in the community who decide if they wave a Palestinian flag, then everyone's going to like them because, you know what I mean? You identify with the victim. Really? You really think they like you? Chance. Not a chance. It's unfortunate that the only thing that reminds us what we are is anti-Semitism, or one of the only things. It's unfortunate that that's the thing that brings us together. But somehow it's the only thing that works. Only when we see ourselves through the eyes of the hater do we start appreciating that we have something. And, people talk about the conversation that Black parents have to have with their kids in America about race and other police will chase you. Now there's conversations that many Jewish parents are having with their kids that they never thought they would have to have. The kid goes on social media and just sees absolute hatred. And he asks his mom and dad, why? What did I do? I'm just a kid. I watch the same movies. I dance to the same music. So I have a bar mitzvah when I'm 13. So what? Why do they hate me? Why does the left wing hate me? Why does the right wing hate me? Don't push away that question if it comes up. Because Tisha B'Av and Pesach and all these stories remind us how important it is that our children know our past. They know our journey. And I would say if you don't know enough of Jewish history, go Google it, read up, to understand whether it was the first temple destroyed by the Babylonians or the second temple destroyed by the Romans, or was what happened in 1492 when the Spanish chased us out, the Inquisition on Tisha B'Av, or whether it was the Germans, or whether it was the Russians, or whether it was the Polish or the Ukrainians, or whether it was the Arab countries that chased all the Jews out after the establishment of the state in 1948. And the whole Jewish communities for thousands of years in Syria and Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, were decimated in moments. Within 2 years, they pretty much emptied out the whole thing. And suddenly the kid realizes that I could be a Jew in South Africa, or I could be a Jew in LA, I could be a Jew in Israel, I could be a Jew in Germany. But the hater sees us all the same. They say a story, I don't know if it's true, but I believe I heard it from a valid source, that There was one country during World War II that only had one Jew, and Hitler in his room had a map. And in each country, you would have the estimate of how many Jews there are in this country. And in that country, you put the number one. In other words, that one person will have to go. Every single Jew he could hate. I mean, the guy lost the war effort. A big part of it was because he didn't want to allocate trains towards the war effort. He wanted to allocate trains to send people to Auschwitz. Obsession with hating Jews. And the counter to that is obsession with loving Jews. Your weird sister-in-law and your strange rabbi and your Haredi radical cousin. I'm not saying you have to condone everyone's behavior, but underneath there has to be this love that's as powerful, if not more powerful, than their hate. The only way to counter hate is absolute obsessive love. If their hate is irrational, then our love has to be irrational. If their hate is to every single person, then our love has to be to every single person. Because ultimately, as Jews, we share the same destiny. You cannot say, oh, the Jew over there is suffering. You know, for many years, it was the Jews in Israel are the ones getting terror attacks, not us. Then suddenly terror attacks went around the world. It was anti-Zionism. Oh, that's only the Zionists they hate. So if the Jewish kid puts around a Palestinian flag around the neck, then everything's happy, hunky-dory because they're going to like us. No. Give them 2 years. They'll tell you who they really hate. That has nothing to do with Israel. They hate you. Licking up to the guy. They used to have a term. They in the shtetl. You know, it wasn't as beautiful as people imagine it. One of the things in the shtetl was, for many years, Jews were not allowed to own land in vast parts of Russia. They had a small area called Pale of the Settlement where they were allowed to live, but many other places they weren't allowed to. So often a Jew would only be able to rent a place from a local owner, what's called a paritz, serf, whatever, like the boss of the town who pretty much owned all the property. It wasn't democracy. You didn't own your own property. And you would rent the space. But because you rented the space, and often you would have hard business and they would charge you exuberant rates, you often couldn't buy it. You couldn't pay your dues. So they would throw you in a pit. They would kill the Jew, etc. And very often they would just use the Jew as advantage for entertainment because they knew they had the Jew wrapped around the finger. And they would make the Jew dance in front of them, make a fool of them, dress up like a bear or do something else stupid and just act silly in front of them. And the Jew would do it because he had no choice. But then they used to, the rabbis at the time used to say, okay, you have no choice. But the moment you're enjoying it, the moment you think they're impressed with you, oh, wow, the Jew knows how to dance. Oh, nah. They called it the mayafis. That means you're too pretty. You're making yourself way too pretty. Was tanzt du the masyafis? What are you dancing the may? What? You have to do it because you have no choice, but you're actually starting to take their compliments. You're actually starting to say, oh gosh, the anti-Semite who just made me dress like a bear is enjoying my dancing and they're giving me a thank you. Oh, wow, I've made it in life. Come on. We have to be respectful of the world and we have to treat the world with dignity, but we don't need the world's approval. When a Jew's waiting for the world's approval, then he has the whole world upside down. We have to stay our course. We do our thing. And the truth is, the world will respect us more. To quote Sachs again, he always says, non-Jews respect Jews who respect Judaism, and they disrespect Jews who disrespect Judaism. In other words, the anti-Semite and every non-Jew, the nice one, the not nice one, they all know one thing. That no matter how much you're convincing them that you're just like them, they're not buying it. There's so many stories of, people who intermarry into family and they're like, oh, wow, they're so accepting. And then one time they just hear their father-in-law, mother-in-law, or even their wife just say, you bloody Jew. And they suddenly realize, no, I'm not part of the family. There's a difference. I think a conversation needs to be had in our families, in our communities, what it means to be a Jew. To have an honest conversation in a way that we never thought we would have to have. Because I pray every single day that anti-Semitism doesn't get worse, although it is getting worse every day. But even if you only see it on the social media, Your kid has to know the background, has to know about the Egyptians and their torment to destroy us, and the Romans, and the Babylonians, and the Persians, and the nations that in the land of Israel when we came there, and all the wars, and all our exiles from country to country. Not so that they feel bad for themselves, but that they know that we come from an incredible history, a painful history, and we're still here and we'll be here as well. But understand, kid, that you were born into this, so you might as well get to know who you are. You know, there's a thing called feral children. What's a feral child? It's a child who, at a young age, often gets neglected by parents, ends up with animals, and starts acting like an animal. And they've had very, mixed success with taking these kind of kids once they find them and try to re-enter them in society. And ultimately, what they try to tell these kids in whatever language they can is, you're not a sheep. You're not a wolf. You're not a lion. You're a human being. Stop trying to be something else. But the kid is so obsessed or so habituated into acting like a sheep that this boy or girl cannot imagine that the life of a human being is so much more enriching than just going bah all day. And that's a terrible example, but it's a great example of what happens when we lose our identity. Yeah, going bah and being like all the sheep and doing everything and talking about all the celebrities and being one of the boy keys or one of the girls and just being, I'm into the same fashion as my non-Jewish neighbor and everything. And I'm into the same sports, and you convince yourself you're exactly the same. Please. You're not. Not because I, the rabbi, say that. Don't take my word for it. Ask the anti-Semite if he likes you or he or she likes you more because I'm not outwardly Jewish, or because I also support Man United. So what possibly could go wrong? Really? No. No. I hope that the talk today wasn't depressing. For me, it wasn't. For me, it was taking this opportunity, which is a terrible opportunity, but taking it and getting to ask ourselves questions, because so many of us are losing our way. I just read a statistic that they presented in the Knesset that 80% of Jews are disinterested in their Judaism around the world. 80%. It's a terrible number. It's 4 out of 5 have no interest. Are your kids one of them? Grandkids, nephews, spouse, you? No judgment. I get it. But don't you just want to know why they hate you for anything else other than knowing your own heritage? If that doesn't interest you, if it doesn't interest you to understand your history, don't you at least just want to know why? What it means to be a Jew? Why every single nationality, from the English who invented the blood libel, to the Russians, to the Arab countries, and everywhere in between, they never accepted us. Why? What is it about us? And that journey to an answer might change your life. I hope it does. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.